if you ever find yourself at a prestigious networking club, say like Capital Club, please don't tell anyone you're unemployed. You see, I happened to land an invitation. My friend had just signed up as a member, and I showed up. So as one does, we were networking, and a gentleman walks up to me, and he says, "What do you do?" I responded, "I'm unemployed." Immediately, you could have seen the blood rush from his face. And I bet you he was thinking, what has happened to this club? What happens when everything that defines you is stripped away? Who are you when you lose how you see yourself? What's left? You see, I started defining myself when I was quite young. I was actually 10 years old. My mom used to work for Kenya Airways, and as one does at 10, I was snooping through her handbag, and I came across a pay slip. It said 30,000 shillings, and then there was a lot of gibberish, and the final figure ended up at 2,000 shillings. I didn't know what that meant in context. All I knew is we were probably struggling. I had to step up. I had to help put food on the table. I was her first daughter. And so I went up to her and said, I'm going to be her co-worker. Because you see, she had a side hustle. So 1 week later, without any ceremony, I found myself coming back home from school. I changed. We took a bus together with my mom to the airport. And 15 hours later, I was in the bowels of London, a freshly minted entrepreneur. Our side hustle was Magendo. If you were alive in the 80s, this was an illegal business, would you believe, of bringing clothes from other countries back into Kenya. It wasn't allowed. That was my introduction into entrepreneurship. And this carried on all through my high school, and indeed through university. Eventually, I got myself a job. It was at a bank. I was very excited because finally I could now earn money outside of sweets and sometimes KFC, which had been my mode of payment till then. I also started networking and learning skills. This went on for 8 years, and I enjoyed myself immensely. But the bag of entrepreneurship had bitten, and so I resigned. I left and started finding something to do. After a few hits and misses, I finally ended up at the love of my life. I called it I'm a diva. Not only because it reminded me of myself, but mostly it was my grandfather's name. And so it just felt right. It fitted. And the journey into creativity began. We were doing stuff to make women look and feel good. It was amazing. I was being creative. We were taking people from Makueni, Bondo, and sometimes Rongai, training them to become hairdressers. And what I was particularly proud of is within a few years, a lot of these ladies could actually get mortgages, and they were supporting their families. We were supporting a supply chain. We were making our clients look amazing. Indeed, we even went into a very niche market, the natural hair. I was super proud. January 15th, 2019. I woke up at 2:30 in the morning. I had a visitor. It wasn't the type of visitor that anyone actually looks forward to, because he was trying to get into my house through a window. This visitor is popularly known as Spider-Man. And for those who don't know, Spider-Man is a notorious burglar known to scale up walls and make away with household goods. So as you can imagine, my morning didn't start great. I was exhausted. But on this day, I had a very important meeting. I was going to an old client to pitch for business. You see, it had been a tough 2018. Business was difficult. There had been 2 elections. People were not spending. There was a rumor, though, from the government that the SMEs are the backbone of the economy. And apparently, there was an anticipated GDP growth of 6%. And I can tell you, I was chasing that 6% for the last 2 years, hopeful, never giving up. But more importantly, thinking about the 45 people whose lives depended on this business. And so, on this day, I made my way down Mombasa Road, not wanting to give up. This was a chance for us to pivot. This was a chance for us to come clean, see a bit of that 6%. I made it for my meeting at 2:30 sharp and started. 30 minutes into my pitch, I could see my phone flashing. It wasn't 1 flash, it wasn't 2. In fact, at some point, it was distracting me, and so I flipped it over. But there was obviously someone else in the meeting who was quite distracted. They were on Twitter. And in the middle of my presentation, they announced that there'd been a terrorist attack at 14 Riverside. This happened to be the location of my business. And immediately, I realized this is why my phone was flashing. I went cold, because it wasn't clear what this terrorist attack was. I looked at my phone, and I could see hundreds of calls. My staff, my family, friends, clients, everyone was trying to reach me. I have no idea how I got from the conference room to my car, and indeed, from Mombasa Road, making my way to Chiromo, it took me 40 minutes. In this time, I was fielding calls. Talking to my staff members, I was sweating. Cold, scared, petrified, no idea what was going on. I couldn't be on Twitter. I was relying on people calling me and giving me snippets of what was going on. I was aware there was a bomb, and it was actually quite close to my shop. Finally, I got word from my manager. My staff was okay, and so were my clients. They were waiting to be evacuated. And as I made my way to Chiromo, there was no access to 14 Riverside. And in spite of my best efforts, I had to keep going straight. That 7 kilometers from Chiromo to ABC Place took 4 hours. Gridlock. In this 4 hours, I was thinking about a business that I had built from scratch, thinking about the lives that we were empowering and changing, thinking about the families they supported, wondering if all these struggles were now going to come to an end, and indeed, really feeling the pain, because indeed the car I was driving on that day was a car that I left the bank with almost 8 years ago. Nothing in my life had changed, but I was always hopeful that this 6% would come through. And finally, I was outside of ABC Place. I stopped and took a moment. It was quiet. Everyone had been evacuated from all of Nairobi. And in this moment, I knew my life was changing. And with it, heavily, the 45 lives that I supported were also going to change. My narrative was going to change from that day. So here I am, 3 months later. Who am I? For years, I've been defined by my business. In fact, the name was me, and I was with the name. I didn't know what to say that afternoon at Capital Club when I was asked, "What do you do?" Because, ladies and gentlemen, there isn't a word for business people who failed. You're not a widower. You're not even unemployed, because in fact, you were never employed. There's no rites of passage. There's nothing. I've been numb. I've been angry. I've been disappointed. And as I consider the transition and think about what's next, and when this question was presented to me in quite a familiar playground, with people that I know and admire and were once my peers, I couldn't relate. I couldn't even say who I was. The transition has taught me very many lessons, but I think the biggest one has been around understanding that failure is inevitable. Indeed, 90% of businesses fail within the first 2 years. We made it to 10. Relationships fail, as do friendships. The lesson that I have learned is about redefining, having a choice about the way forward. And that choice is strangely exciting, because now I have a new page, a new lease to life. But my biggest lesson has come from a very unexpected teacher. My daughter, she's 4.5. I have twin girls. But Lulu has been teaching me quite a few lessons. You see, I allow them over the weekends to choose the clothes they can wear. They have free choice. And often Lulu will choose a swimming costume, little boots, and a backpack, especially when I say we're going to the shopping mall. And she's the happiest person you'll ever meet. She's greeting all the watchmen. She's laughing from the bottom of her life. Because you see, Lulu only chooses things that make her heart sing. And as I go forward and redefine in this transition period, the one thing that I'm sure about is I will only choose things that make my heart sing. And I can promise you, ladies and gentlemen, next time I'm invited to Capital Club, I will be taking Lulu with me. Thank you.